Hey, I was asked to make a video about my top 10 horror movies and what got me into horror. I first got into horror when I was about 12 years old, almost 13, and the first movie I ever saw was the horror slasher Scream. And what was different about Scream was at the time, for a slasher movie, it was really innovative, it was really self aware, it made fun of the cliches. It had a lot of pop culture references to classic horror movies. And for me, it introduced the horror tropes of the final girl, the first kill, just stuff like that. And back in 1996, Scream came along when slashers were pretty much dead in the water, and Wes Craven's Scream brought them back, for better or for worse. And another Wes Craven film is called The Last House on the Left, which had it had a big influence on me. It was the first kind of skeezy, oily 70s film that I watched. It had a really creepy, greasy atmosphere. It's about a group of girls that go to a rock concert, and one of the girls comes from a really nice, sheltered family. The other girl comes from, the big bad, big city. And the parents are afraid of letting their, beloved daughter go out to the city to a concert where the girls go looking for some grass, and they end up running afoul of a group of recently escaped inmates. And even by 70s standards, it was known for having a lot of violence, rape, torture, that even to me, it still holds up as like a really skeezy, disturbing movie. I actually had the original on DVD, and I ended up selling it just because it was just too disturbing for me. And there was also a remake of it back in 2009, which was still disturbing but more streamlined and toned down in a way. The next film I'm going to talk about is called Suspiria, directed by Dario Argento. And Argento is always known for having kind of a playful, flamboyant sets and colors. And Suspiria is about an American ballerina going to Italy, I think. I think it's Italy, to go to ballerina school. And while she's there, a set of really disturbing ritualistic murders takes place. And it turns out that the school is headed by a coven of witches. And it's up to the American heroine to find out the truth. And Dario Argento usually directed giallos, which were classic slasher films. And again, they were noted for lots of vibrant and beautiful colors, a dreamlike, hazy kind of fairy tale setting, ambience. And of course, his movies were known for, by today's standards, cheesy dubbing. But I don't personally have a problem with it. I really like older films, even if they have cheesy dubbing. The next film I'm going to talk about is Friday the 13th. As a kid, I would always sneak and watch the Friday the 13th movies on cable, and was always really terrified of them, which in retrospect sounds kind of silly now. But growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, for me, Friday the 13th, Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street, those type of films were like legendary. And the reason I like Friday the 13th is that even though in the early days it was treated like, a piece of shit, shitty slasher summer camp film, it went on to become really notorious and even legendary in a way. And it's often imitated and rarely duplicated. And just the whole atmosphere of the summer camp. And you have, the fresh, young, fun camp counselors fixing up the camp, getting it ready for the kids to come for summer camp. And of course, you learn about the past of Pamela Voorhees and what happened to her son Jason. And of course, right around then, the murders start to happen again. And of course, you have Kevin Bacon in an early role who went on to, some really substantial roles, winning Oscars and other notoriety. Because back then, I guess if you were in a horror movie, it was like the bottom of the barrel for you. You weren't thought of as much. The actress who played Pamela Voorhees was a very stagey actress, kind of Shakespearean. And she straight up said, I think the movie's a piece of shit. I only did it to get a new car for the paycheck. But since then, she's grown to like the movie and her status as the legendary Pamela Voorhees. Next, I'm going to talk about The Curse of the Demon, which is an older black and white film. Excuse me. And it stars Dana Andrews and Peggy Cummings as two people researching the death of Peggy Cummings' character's uncle. And it traces back to a flamboyant man in the neighborhood who is known for practicing dark black magic. And not to spoil it, but it's really atmospheric and creepy. It's directed by Jacques Tourneur, who directed Cat People and other suspenseful films of the era. And I just really like the creepy atmosphere, the black and white, the bleakness of it. There's a song called Cherry Time, I think, or Cherry Rhyme, that characters sing during a failed seance, and it's just really creepy. And I just really like Dana Andrews' hard-boiled but nice guy persona in the film, and Peggy Cummings is the sweet young girl trying to find out what happened to her uncle. And sadly, Peggy Cummings had a really brief acting career. She was only in so many films, and that was pretty much it for her. She was also in a really good movie called Gun Crazy, which is kind of like a suspense, thriller, crime film, if you could hunt it down. The next one I'm going to talk about is Night of the Demons, which is a 1980s film about a group of kids who break into a supposedly haunted house to party during Halloween night. And they're all in different costumes, up to hijinks, smoking grass, trying to get beer from the local gas station, smoozing it up with each other. And they manage to resurrect a demon in the house. And they have to try to stay alive over the course of the night and escape the house from Angela, who's possessed by a really gnarly looking demon. And it's a really kind of cheesy, kind of awesome, schlocky horror film that's reached cult status since the 80s. And there was also a remake of it in 2009, which wasn't too bad. It starred Monica Keena, Shannon Elizabeth, Bobby Sue Luther, and and Edward Furlong from Terminator. And the remake wasn't too bad. Like I said, like most remakes, it's more modern and hip, more streamlined, more CGI, which sometimes is the reason I like older movies, because they didn't have the technology to rely on CGI. They had claymation, animatronics, puppets, um, fake blood, homemade masks and prosthetics, which really are an art form, and you had to usually have the people in the costumes, like Creature from the Black Lagoon in a really bulky, uncomfortable Gillman costume. And you just think, wow, back then those people were in those nasty costumes and special effects for hours on end in B movies. And now they can just do, better prosthetics, makeup, or even CGI. It just makes me kind of think back to the days when movies weren't so Hollywoodized like they are now. And next I'm going to talk about Happy Birthday to Me. I already talked about it before, so I'm just going to focus on the pros and cons of it. I really liked that it was like a cluster mess of a movie. You had car chases, you had disappearing kids, you had red herrings, you had Melissa Sue Anderson flashing back to a shady past. You had commentary on the rich clique and, kids who lived on the other side of the tracks who weren't as popular. Almost like a mishmash of a soap opera and a slasher film, and it really worked somehow. And Melissa Sue Anderson gave a really great performance, and she was known for her role as a kid on Little House on the Prairie. So it was a really strange movie choice for her to take. But I really love Happy Birthday to Me. It has a legendary ending, the gore. It has a beautiful theme song at the end. And back then, certain horror movies had like these really beautiful ballads that were obviously based on the movie. And you just don't really get the cheesy, beautiful ballads anymore like horror movies used to. And the next one I'm going to talk about is called Sweet 16, which is kind of similar to Happy Birthday to Me. It's about a beautiful girl who is getting ready for her Sweet 16 party, and people in the small desert town start ending up, horribly murdered, and for some reason all eyes point to her. And it's a weird slasher. It's almost like a thriller, not really a slasher. And you have some commentary on the Native Americans who live in the town and who are kind of given a raw deal by the local police. And it also stars Dana Kimmel, who is in Friday the 13th Part 3, who is a really kind of sweet and cute in the movie. Kind of, I don't want to say ditzy, but kind of squeaky and frightened easily. And she had a tough time shooting Friday the 13th Part 3. She objected to being in a morally ambiguous movie like that with teenagers having sex and drinking and, being decapitated. And since she's kind of turned her back on the part of her life that was involved with acting, and now she just enjoys, being a religious woman. So I thought that was interesting. And finally, Part 10. Part 10 is an obvious choice. It would be Night of the Living Dead. I never saw a movie like it. When I first saw it, it had the bleakness, black and white, kind of milky footage. It had the apocalypse, kind of creepy, eerie, hopeless vibe of the 60s, excuse me. And it was about Barbara and her brother visiting their father's tombstone, and suddenly a zombie apocalypse breaks out, and Barbara flees to a farmhouse where she meets a cast of other characters, and they have to try to survive the zombies from getting in. And back then, zombies still existed in movies before Night of the Living Dead, but Romero really put his own spin on it. Like, shoot them in the head to kill them, them feasting on flesh instead of just being like mindless slaves, like how zombies were depicted in earlier movies like White Zombie, etc. I just really dug the movie and the musical score. And the musical score was from Teenagers from Outer Space, which is a B movie. So I didn't find that out about the music until I watched an episode of Mystery Science Theater. And you also have cameos by Chili Willy, who was a local famous personality and who appeared in the movie as a local news reporter. And you just had the creepy Pennsylvania countryside. And anytime I watch it, my mom's always like, oh, that movie, I was so scared watching it as a kid. I remember, the zombies coming right up from out of the ground. And even though that doesn't happen in this movie, she might have been thinking of a different movie. But just like memories like that, like my mom is in her 60s and she can still remember, the impact that Night of the Living Dead had on her. And no matter how many different zombie movies or knockoffs, there'll never be another Night of the Living Dead. You know what I mean? There'll never be another film like that. So, and to wrap it up, I really enjoy horror movies, not just because of the gore and the torture. I even like older movies where the killing is off-screen or, cheesily done. But I guess I identify more about the victims and what they're going through, and I guess the fragility of human life, and what would I do in their situation. And the great thing about horror movies is, unlike in real life, you watch a movie, it scares you, it frightens you, and it's over, you face your fear, the lights come up, and, you get to go home and live another day. And in real life, the way things are now with the news, real life is becoming more and more scary each day. Not like back in the day when my parents said life was easier and better and more honest. And now violence and just how horrible people can be in general is more out in the open with the advances in technology and whatnot. So in a way, for me, horror movies are like a reminder of how human we are. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any of your own top 10 lists, or you don't agree with me, or you agreed with me, or you had other suggestions for other videos, clickety click on the comments below and I'll get back to you. And that's it for now. Thanks.